where mass protests are continuing in China, with citizens demanding justice for 10 people killed in a fire while they were sealed inside their apartment building on November 24th. The demonstrations follow 3 years of zero COVID policy, which is often manifested as lockdowns, with doors and windows to some apartment blocks chained shut. But these protests involve rare criticism of the Chinese government. Demonstrators have been chanting Communist Party step down, Xi Jinping step down. This is extremely rare in a country where dissent can invite arrest and extreme penalties. China's zero COVID policy is the last of its kind among major world economies and has recently triggered wave after wave of snap protests as the government remains committed to the movement restrictions in the country.
They restricted our building 3 days ago, and in the middle of the night, they used this wooden bar to lock the entrance, writing "out of service" on it. And reportedly, there were people at the door preventing the residents from getting out. This morning, when I went downstairs, I saw this wooden bar and took it off, because I think it's a matter of safety. And the property management, they don't have the right to seal the door. After that, I opened the door and I called police to report it.
Now, for more on this, we are joined by Carice Witte. She's the founder and executive director of the Sino-Israel Global Network and Academic Leadership. Let's start with the big one. How rare is public condemnation of the party and why?
Public condemnation is extremely rare, but I want to start with protests. This is a very common way of allowing some expression of concern, disappointment, anger, etc., for the entire history of the People's Republic. But since Xi Jinping came into power, these protests have been more and more limited. The punishments, the concern about the jailing and other kinds of people being taken without trial necessarily. So the concern is that if they stand up, the return on their investment will be extreme. However, we are seeing something that is extremely rare due to an overwhelming amount of suffering across the country repeatedly, over and over, month after month, sparked, as you said, by the fire that took place in Urumqi, where 10 people died. And we were very shocked to see that people start to stand up and complain. China has always talked about their 1.4 billion population. This is why they are a concern. Once there is a mass protest, it will be very difficult to rein it in. However, given the fact that Xi Jinping has total control over the armed police and the PLA, there is very little chance that this will make any systemic change within China.
And that does lead to the next question, because you just mentioned Xi Jinping's total control over all police and law enforcement arms in the country. What will the party's response to these protests be, given that they're directly calling for Xi Jinping himself to stand down?
There will be increased censorship. This is already one of the concerns. People are posting blank posters to protest against the fact that their voice has been limited to an extreme extent. They watched protests that took place a few months ago against banks that would not provide funds to account holders in rural areas, blocked by the COVID health codes. They're now protesting against health codes being in existence. They want those canceled. It's very likely that in response, there will be even more tightening of health code controls, movement of people, because once this gets out of hand, historically, it has proven to be very dangerous for the country overall. I will say that there is a possibility that at the same time that there is a tightening of control, there may also well be a loosening of the COVID zero policy. One thing we have to ask ourselves is, why is this necessary? The healthcare system has been said over and over to be unable to handle any kind of real epidemic. And we only see about 40,000 outbreaks across the country, which by global standards is tiny. But the Chinese medical care system is not in a position to handle a mass amount of COVID outbreaks. They had an opportunity to purchase the Moderna vaccine, which could probably change the landscape of the country and end the need for COVID zero. However, there is a policy of not accepting foreign vaccines unless the entire IP is provided. They were in negotiations in October. Moderna almost sold into China, but because they would not agree to give the entire IP to China, the deal fell through. As a result, China is not prepared for facing COVID.
Okay, it's definitely an interesting look at things, and the big question that's going to be on everyone's mind moving forward is, what does the Chinese government see as a bigger threat, coronavirus or the growing protests? And I guess we're going to find that out over the next few days. Thank you very much, Carice.